2:30. Is that your time? Okay, awesome. Well, we're going to start with introductions. My name is Verra-Tirado, and I'm the Bureau Chief with the Bureau of Exceptional Education and Student Services with the Department of Ed. And I have two of our team members here, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and just a little bit about what your role is with the Department of Ed.
Hi, I'm April Katine, and I'm the Director of the Bureau Resource and Information Center and Parent Services. So I oversee everything communication, parent services, fiddlers, those kinds of things.
My name is Curtis Jenkins. I'm one of the school counseling consultants in the Bureau. And we're on the student support services side of the hall.
And Curtis also serves as our liaison for military family issues. And so that's a big part of his role in terms of military children of parents who are in the military, not with and without disabilities, and have a proper support and transition when they come to Florida.
I'm Amy Delaney. I'm the Parent Services Program Specialist for the Bureau. I work directly with parent liaisons in each district. Also, the ESE Parent Survey, which hopefully most of you are aware of, that happens in the spring of each year at each school. Oh, and Family Cafe is my project. So I can't take credit for all the work they do. But as I always say, it's life-changing, this experience. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. And so just to orient you real quickly to what we're going to be talking about in today's session, this is basically kind of the state of the state, very broad overview of we look at the data, like how are we doing? We talk about maybe some new statutes, rules that may impact students, those kinds of things. You each should have a copy of the PowerPoint. If you don't, we have some extras floating around. I also was handing out my card. So most packets of the PowerPoint had my business card if you want to contact me. So I would encourage if you have a personal situation that you need some assistance with, before you leave, make sure you get our contact information for any one of us four. I know this is a jam-packed conference, and so typically it's difficult to really get into, I found, the depth that is needed in those kind of conversations here while there's 3 or 4 people behind you, and you're talking about somebody, some really personal kinds of things. So I always encourage folks, get our contact information. Let's meet really quick. It's great to put names and faces together, and then let's follow up, once the conference has ended and we're back in Tallahassee. So that usually works really well, and in fact, over the years, we've made some great partnerships with folks. In fact, some of you in the room here, the very first year I think I met you was you bringing an issue to my attention, and we had a chance to chat. And as an example, a parent was sharing how some work she's doing as a parent advocate, not an official parent advocate, but as a parent who advocates, which is what we all should do. It was able to bring about some needed change. So we're excited about that. So you have your PowerPoint. I'm going to go ahead and get us going. A real important component to the way we think about special education in Florida is from preschool to post-school. And preschool in Florida begins, in fact, with our partnerships with Early Steps, which is birth to 3. And you heard, if you were there last night in the Governor's Summit, you heard our Surgeon General talk about Early Steps, and that's under the Department of Health. We are under the Department of Education. But for students who are early identified through Early Steps, then many, not all, but many transition into our public school program for students with disabilities that begin at age 3, and then ultimately transitioning into kindergarten. So we want to think about from preschool and then everything that we're doing, how is it aligning, and you see our precious young lady here, to not just graduation, but graduation so that when she leaves our system, she's got opportunities, she's got choices, she's got options, meaningful options for independence. And so we want every child to graduate college and career ready, and we need to think about what does that mean in today's world. And sometimes when people hear the word college, they say, well, college isn't for everybody. But we believe that certainly ongoing lifelong learning is for everyone. We all know that. If any of us are employed, we know we have to constantly be learning new things. So we have to teach our students that learning doesn't end when you graduate. And then certainly career, meaningful job opportunities that that are competitive, that help folks to be as independent as they can be. The other big piece that we talk a lot about is equity, access, but access actually meaning not only is it available to everyone, but you have the ability to participate in it, and then attainment means, in the way we're thinking of it is, we're expecting to see the same high quality results for our students with disabilities as we would for other students. So thinking about where we've come, the commissioner talked about this last night, thinking about the 70s when she said she was graduating from high school. She did say that out loud. So I cannot get in trouble because she did say that. And just how far we've come, knowing we still have a long way to go, but the beginning was just even equity, just even the ability to come to school, access. Well, we should allow kids to have some access and get into some classes. Now we're in the era of attainment. We need to have the same high expectations for all students to leave our school system with the skills they need to have meaningful, productive adult lives with as much independence as possible. And in fact, IDEA, when it was reauthorized, this is our national governing law that actually required that students with disabilities be educated, that was passed in 1975 originally. In 2004 included this language, that educational results for students with disabilities is an essential element of our national policy to ensure equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for individuals with disabilities. So it's certainly much more than just helping students to feel safe and comfortable in school and have a nice time in school and then graduate and then stay home and stay on, be on the couch without, opportunities for work, opportunities for social interaction, opportunities for independent living. And so it's really shifting to shifting that whole way of thinking. And so one of the things I encourage all of us as educators and parents, and I myself, my oldest two students went through the school system, children went through the school system with IEPs, is how do we help ensure our kids can be as independent as possible? And that starts with that preschool and post-school. All along the way, how are we ensuring that we're pushing them, but not too much, right? But enough to where we know that they're going to be able to be independent. So across the state, we want to see equity and excellence. We want to see that no matter what zip code you happen to live in, I would expect to see the same kinds of results when I'm looking at the data across the state, whether it be graduation, whether it be assessment results, etc. We also have 3 very specific targeted goals: improving our graduation rate, decreasing the dropout rate, and improving post-school outcomes. And that post-school outcomes piece is really, really critical, because that's really the measure, is if we've improved graduation and we have more kids graduating, what is it leading to though? Is it leading to more students entering into meaningful post-school opportunities? Okay, and then also partnering with those folks in higher education, in career source, many of the folks that you see here today, to ensure that there are places and opportunities ready for our students when they graduate, right? So it's one thing we have all of our kids ready. And in fact, I have some families that are really pushing. In fact, a mama who came in and said, I want to come to your session, but I want to go to the UCF. I want to hear more about the post-secondary program for kids with intellectual disabilities. I'm like, please go, because we need you. I mean, it was good to see her here, but this idea that now that she's got her son has been in more rigorous classes, more inclusive opportunities, already thinking, how do I ensure that when he graduates, it just doesn't end, and then there's nothing to continue on to. So 5 game changers that the Office of Special Education has identified at the federal level is the importance of aligning early childhood services and K-12 services, so that we don't see those as 2 separate, distinct things. Like, oh, we do what Early Steps does one thing and Pre-K ESE does something else, and then you start kindergarten and it's this whole different experience. That the whole thing ought to be aligned and be seamless. And pushing or developing policies that push all teachers to be prepared and trained to work with students with disabilities. And then I added in parents. And I see very critical need, and for those of you who may be affiliated with higher ed, you might be professors or work in higher education, that a piece that a lot of times as a teacher, my beginning background is teaching, was you don't really learn about how to work with parents. And so, it's not something that naturally happens, because, you're thinking, I'm kind of, I thought I was trained to be the professional, right? And and this is what I think needs to happen. And then parents come in and have this very different opinion. And so how do we help not only with current teachers, but pre-service, so that you're learning early on how valuable parents are. So parent involvement is more than just parents who, make sure their children come to school every day and bring cookies and stuff like that, although that's nice, so don't stop that if you're one of those parents who does those things. But parent involvement can be uncomfortable for sometimes as teachers, right? Because that means a parent may disagree, because they're involved, they're asking questions, and that's not a bad thing. But how to help support our teachers so they don't see that as a bad thing. They don't feel that means that maybe they're doing something wrong. Maybe if a parent doesn't agree with me, maybe that suggests I don't know what I'm doing. And I think that's where some of that kind of friction begins to happen. So I really think that's a really important piece. One thing that Florida did, and actually, Senator Gardner, and it was really nice of him and his wife, I think his wife's still here at the event, but he was here last night, and he did a lot to push legislation while he was Senate President. And one thing that he did was, part of the legislation was a requirement that all teachers, not just teachers of students with disabilities in Florida, are required to have at least 20 hours of in-service credit or one college credit in teaching students with disabilities in order to be recertified. Every single teacher, PE teachers, art teachers, history teachers, calculus teachers, even special ed teachers. Some of the special ed teachers, well, wait, I'm already special ed. All of us, it impacts all of us. In fact, last year we were chatting because I renewed my certification. You always want to keep, by the way, those of your teachers, we always want to keep our certification. One never knows, right? And, but anyhow, so I think that's a really good sign, and that Florida's moving in the right direction. And there's folks that think that we ought to do more, and I would agree that that's a good first step, though. Providing access to differentiated instruction and effective interventions for students. Now, this is another thing that we're really committed to in Florida, and that would be differentiated instruction, universal design for learning. And in fact, what's exciting is the new reauthorization of the No Child Left Behind, which is the federal act, includes, it's now the ESSA Act, includes language that discusses universal design for learning as a way of creating classrooms that are responsive to all learners. So it's moved from the special ed world to the general ed world, and thinking that if we have classes that are responsive to the needs of our students with the most complex needs, what happens to then the learning of all students who are in those classes? Everybody gets better, because that means we've created classrooms where students who are learning English can excel. Students who maybe have some types of disabilities that don't require an IEP will excel. And we've talked about, many of us have talked about this, literally everybody can use an IEP, because we're all so unique and individual in terms of our learning styles. And then including all students in assessment and making sure that our assessments are fully accessible. And that's a really important piece, and I really encourage folks to continue to have your students participate in our assessments. Why do I think that's important? Is because for a long time in accountability systems nationally and statewide, the scores of students with disabilities were only included in a certain, for learning gains only, but achievement was not included. So in other words, you could have you could be earning a high score for accountability purposes, but not necessarily have all the scores to the full extent of your students with disabilities included. By having that component added, and this has been some time now, I believe 5 or 6 years, it really raised the attention of the outcomes, attainment for students with disabilities. Remember, because we want to go from just access to attainment. But now people were paying more attention because it became part of the accountability system. How are our students with disabilities doing on the various assessments, etc.? So it's a slippery slope when we start to not have our kids participate for a variety of reasons. Some kids may not be able to, and that we have a process in Florida for an exemption to be requested for medical complexity and those kinds of things. But for the vast majority can and should, and and I would encourage that because I think it really helps keep our system accountable. So that's something I am worried because our numbers for kids with disabilities being assessed has actually been going down in the last couple of years. So that's a worrisome piece for me. And then providing more transition planning for students, just like we've talked about. So making sure that we've fully connected our youth to the next level of agency support or community partnership, who are going to walk alongside parents and youth as they move to the next phase, and not just having kind of this, congratulations, you graduate, graduation party, and then, wow, what happens next? What do we do? So the next piece is I'm going to give the state of the state, which kind of goes over some of our data. So this gives a sense of our different percentages of students with disabilities in Florida. Our largest population continues to be SLD, and I put the little acronyms. We define those there. They make up 38%, and then SI and LI, which are speech impaired and language impaired, together combined are another large group. Our most rapidly growing area of eligibility is autism. Our autism spectrum disorder is 9%, with a decline in our intellectual disability eligibility, and some of that has to do with, years and years ago, probably there were a group of students who were identified as having an intellectual disability who actually had autism. So as we've gotten better and understood the, autism, I think we're seeing that shift a bit. And we've got our other health impaired, and then EBD is 5%. Now other includes, let's see, I thought I had another slide with other, but other obviously includes, visual impairment, deaf and hard of hearing, orthopedically impaired, etc. So altogether, those would be what we call our low prevalence or low incidence programs. High prevalence would be SLD, speech, language, and then really autism is next in terms of the percent. This slide represents the percent of students in Florida who have a disability. So in 2007 and 2008, we were at 14.4%. We've gone down from 12.9, we're back up to about 13.4. So we're right around the national average. That's about what you would expect, and very consistent when you compare us to some of the other very large states. An interesting trend that has happened has been, there's kind of been a decline. This decline that you see here has also been a national decline, and then now there's also this new kind of upward trend. So now someone though began to disaggregate where that trend happened, and most of the new growth actually is represented in New York. So it's on my list to find out more about what's going on with. But what we know, New York, Florida is a popular place for people from New York to come to and move to. So if they're growing, then we probably will have, there is a connection, we know that. And then this shows our regular class placement. Regular class placement in the federal definition is when students spend 80% or more of their time in the general education environment with their non-disabled peers, okay? And so back in 9-10, we were around 67%. If I were to go back a few more years before that, we were around 50% for a long time. So 50% was kind of where we hung for several years. And we've been on an upward trend. Now this is a small graph, so we went from 74 to 73, and it looks really dramatic. But this is really not that dramatic. It's just that we kept it at 76%. Overall, we will get our this is for 15-16. So this is this school year. We're at 73%. So we saw a little bit of a decline. And what happens is if we have a slight shift in some of our very large districts, we usually will see that kind of impact. This compares us to the 7 largest states for our regular class placement. So we are often compared to these states: California, Illinois, New York, Ohio. This is the United States average, Pennsylvania, Texas, and there we are in Florida. So although we have a lot of work still to do to improve inclusion, I think the data would suggest we've got some strengths and we're moving in the right direction, and I'm proud to see how we compare to some of the other states that are similar to us. This slide talks about our standard diploma rate. And the top blue line represents the federal uniform rate for all students. The green line that's next is the standard diploma rate for students with disabilities. That rate is for students who graduate with a standard diploma, whether it took them 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, you know, all the way, because our students can stay in school until they're age 22 and continue to work towards that. And then the red line on the bottom represents those students with disabilities who graduated within 4 years. So the top blue is 4 years for all students, and the red is 4 years for students with disabilities. The green is the more flexible calculation that allows for extended year. So you can see, again, you know, we were at 40%, we're at 62%, we were at 37% for 4-year cohort, we're now at almost 57%. Now we just had our 15-16 graduation, and so what I know anecdotally at most districts and high school principals are really excited that they feel they have an increase in graduates. And I'm going to talk a little bit about changes to our standard diploma, but we do have a new pathway to standard diploma that includes students who are participating in our access courses, and we actually have some of our very first graduates this year who are graduating with that new standard diploma that formerly would have been a special diploma. Now it's a standard diploma. They earn the same diploma that all other students in the state of Florida earn. So we're really pleased to see those trends. So let's look back. We've got an increase of inclusion. We've got an increase in graduation. This here, this slide describes the way our students are graduating. So you see, when you break down all of our graduates in any given year, our students with disabilities, 40% or more are graduating with a standard diploma, and this means they met all the other requirements exactly the same way all other students did. Okay? This here, that ACT, SAT, means that they may not have passed the FSA or the FCAT test, but they got a concordance score on the ACT or SAT. That's a score that count. That is available for all students, not just students with disabilities. So this 6% and the 41% represent 47% of our students graduated in the exact same way that all students graduated. This piece here is students with disabilities who may have needed a waiver for the required exit exams, either the FSA or the end of course exams. So for example, let's say I'm a student and I have passed my Algebra 1 class, but I'm really struggling to pass the exit exam. My IEP team can meet, and if my teacher and team determine that I've demonstrated mastery of those Algebra 1 standards, they can waive my requirement to pass the exam. They don't waive my participation in the exam, they waive the requirement to pass it so that I'm able to graduate without having to have passed that. But I still have to demonstrate that I know that I've mastered those classroom standards, okay? Oh, and a special diploma. So this is an interesting thing. What you really see the biggest impact here is as our special diploma numbers have gone down, I've seen kind of an uptick. Now it's not a huge uptick, but it is an uptick in waivers. And so one of the things to think about is for students whom in the past may have been on a special diploma and maybe we're not taking these same rigorous tests, the uptick and the need for a waiver may be a result, you know, and I don't have hard data, but that's just one of my hypotheses as I look at that. But for sure, we know that we'd much rather have a student who's participating in these courses. Remember, the waiver means they still demonstrated the knowledge. It's not waiving your knowledge of Algebra 1, it's just waiving your final exam. In many cases, I hear about kids who've missed it by like 1 point or something to that effect. Here you see our trend for special diploma. That's been steadily decreasing, and it's important to note this is before it was declining even before the special diploma was repealed 2 summers ago. But as it was declining, here's the thing, because there's an urban myth out there, is that without the special diploma, dropout goes up and graduation goes down. But so far I've shown you trends that show as special diploma goes down, graduation for a standard diploma does what? Goes up, right? You've seen that data. So we're going to look at dropout. What's happening to our dropout rate? It's declining. So that's one thing I want you to feel good about, because there's a lot of like, what are we going to do without this special diploma? And I'm going to talk about that. But if that's something that you're particularly yourself anxious about, again, before you leave today, make sure you get with one of my staff or myself so we can work with you, because we really are seeing that the new options are way better and give more choices for children. And the data suggests that kids are more likely with a standard diploma and the options that we're presenting are more likely to not only graduate but also to not drop out. So they're staying in school. And this just gives you an example about how we calculate the dropout rate. When you see the smaller type of dropout number, the denominator is usually your cohort. So I had 400 students who should have been graduating this year, and 10 dropped out, so my cohort is 2.5%. The one that I just showed you, the formula, and this might be getting into the weeds, so those of you who like data, just want to make sure you have this. It says if 400 students exited this year, and then we look at how did they exit. Did they graduate with a standard diploma, special diploma? Did they drop out? Did they move, etc.? And then that calculates the rate, okay? So our state rate is going down. The third piece of data that we receive is from the Florida Education and Training Placement Information Program. And what this does is it matches student information to actually Social Security's, and it locates students a year after graduation and identifies where they are. Are they in employment? Are they in continuing education? Are they in the military? Etc. So there's a lot of different things that it looks at, and this is for not just students with disabilities, this is for all students. And this is some of the data that we have. The last data that we have is 13-14. We are requesting another round of this, but what it shows you is the gold is higher ed. So you see the majority of students are found in higher ed. However, it's only very little majority. It's like 51%. Okay, so it's not like 90% are found in higher ed, only 51%. Then we've got the next one is either in higher ed or competitively employed. And competitive employment would be full-time employment at minimum wage or higher. And then the third, which is the lowest one, is employed, which could be part-time or in any type of continuing education. So meaning maybe I'm at a technical program, I'm learning, I'm at a vocational program, learning a skill, that type of thing. But again, you're in some type of school. Now, this shows you under our old special diploma, which still exists, we have 2 more groups that could graduate with a special diploma. This year's, actually next year will be our last group of seniors will be able to graduate with a special diploma. But this shows you our students who graduate with a standard diploma. This is all students with a standard diploma. This is students with disabilities with a standard diploma. So this is employment. This is a special diploma. So what do you see here? Do you see a difference between graduation with a standard diploma and a special diploma in terms of employment? Huge difference. Very, yeah, it's a barrier because right there, and years ago, again, there's this urban myth that people can have that special diploma and just get, nobody looks at it as everybody treats it like the same. They don't. Maybe years ago they did, but now they know the different employers in the military and they're looking for a standard diploma. So the new pathways to a standard diploma eliminates a barrier, an unnecessary barrier for students with disabilities. Employment full-time, you do see that our students with a special diploma, if they are employed full-time, then they're in the, they're similar to all other students, but as a very small percentage. This is what really worries me, the continuing education. If they've left our school with a special diploma, they're only 4% are in any kind of ongoing learning. And who needed the most ongoing learning out of the 3 groups of kids? Special diploma. Needed the most, right? Because we know we gave them, it was a modified content, modified curriculum, modified, all of those things. So we absolutely know that there needs to be continuing education. And then they're much more likely to be receiving public assistance. Now, of course, some of our students may always need some type of assistance, and that's fine. And I love how we're hearing about ways that we can work and maintain, protections through Social Security, et cetera. Because sometimes, no matter working 40 hours a week, the income that an individual may bring in is not enough to cover all the costs of independent living, for example, because the costs are going to be higher if you have special needs. So it's good to hear that we're really getting on board, and this is beyond K-12. Obviously, I'm not in charge of housing and those things. But to see that those are really being looked at, to say, we've got youth who want to work. They still may need some support, though, some public assistance. But what we don't want to see is youth who are receiving public assistance that have no choices and are afraid, I can't work, I want to work, but I can't because I'm going to lose my public assistance. And that I can't afford to live anywhere else. I might be in a public, like a Section 8 apartment type of thing, So we want to make sure we're creating a system where everyone's incentivized to be able to do their best and work and not feel penalized when I'm actually beginning to be successful. And so I'm glad that things are happening to change that. So we're going to talk now a little bit more in depth about the high school requirement changes. And so this is part of the statute that Senator Gardner helped to lead. So a reminder is that even though we're changing and we have new pathways, the expectations is that the majority of students will continue to be successful on the current pathways. Let me go back to what I mean. We don't expect that the new pathways, see how here I said right now over 47% of our kids are graduating the exact same way as other kids, and then add this number in. So most of our kids right now are graduating with almost exactly the same way that everyone else is. Our new option for access point diplomas really is replacing the special diploma and saying instead, the small number of students who are on access point courses, your diploma will also be a standard diploma. But it's not meant to say, let's move kids who are doing well here out of the traditional courses and into access courses. But it's really meant to legitimize our access courses. And I will talk about access courses if I see a couple of confused faces, so we'll talk about that. So in 14-15, a reminder, nearly 62% of all students with disabilities earn a traditional standard diploma, because we have not yet had our first access point graduate. Well, we do now, but their data isn't available to us yet. We typically get new graduation data around December of next year. So, I know. So beginning 14-15, all students in Florida have the opportunity to earn a standard diploma based on our Florida standards. Students with significant cognitive disabilities are able to earn that through our access courses, and they participate in our Florida standards alternate assessment. Additionally, in their wisdom, the legislature added a provision to where the IEP team can choose to defer the receipt of the diploma so students can stay and continue to work on post-secondary transition activities. So in other words, without that, graduation with a standard diploma typically means the school system no longer has an obligation to provide an education for a student. In other words, the relationship has ended. There was a concern, particularly for our students with significant cognitive disabilities, knowing how important those years from 18 to 22 are for transition preparation. And so they've added the component where basically you earn your diploma. Most districts, their policies are going to be, and I haven't heard anybody who's not going to do this, the students would participate in the commencement activities, but they're deferring actually receiving their diploma because they're choosing to stay and work on programs that the district offers in partnership with a community-based type experience, et cetera, to prepare for life after school.
Now, when you talk about standard diploma, are you talking about like middle school age into high school age, or just high school like 9 through 12? Like,
Standard diploma starts, is a high school. It's a
okay,
high school.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the special diploma statute was repealed as of July 1st, 2015. So the last group of students who will be participating as graduating with a special diploma will be this year's new senior class entering. Now, the good thing is we had many students who, and this still applies, if you are still in the school system and you're under age 22, you have the opportunity to be considered for the new diploma. So if your family, if your child, if you haven't looked into that, please get with one of us, get with your school counselor, and that's where the first group who graduated this year, those were some students who started on special diploma, and with their family and their school teams, they were able to move them to the new pathway, and they're graduating this year. So this comes from National Center on Educational Outcomes, and this is some key things that states should consider when you're thinking about meaningful diploma options. The first is setting high college and career expectations and clear goals. And again, obviously the concept of career readiness may look different when we're thinking about, for example, a student who needs supported employment, right? But there's still a career readiness. And I think that's the piece that sometimes I still hear. It makes me really sad. These kids can't work, or these kids can't. And what we're learning now is there's so much that we don't know yet about what kids with significant complex disabilities can do. And so I think we just need to not say any of those things and say, let's try, right? And let's get creative and let's think about that. So, but I think when people think about career, that right away they're thinking traditional career, independent, not realizing that students may have the ability to have supported employment where they do have actual, job coaches and those kinds of things to really help them, because they may not be able to be independently employed, but we're still thinking about career, right? They also recommended limiting the number of diploma options, and so we did that in Florida because it's the standard diploma. We had special and standard. Now we have the standard, but we have multiple equally rigorous paths. So if you really look at what we did, what we've done in Florida has really mirrored what the national research suggests we ought to do. Identify appropriate diploma options, and this is for students with that SCD is for students with significant cognitive disabilities. I think I have a slide on that. I'm going to get to that. Good question. If I don't, I'll come back to it, okay? But significant cognitive disability, I'll talk about that, would be students with, typically with intellectual disabilities. So what is an intellectual disability? Okay, to really put it in context, forever it was called mental retardation. We've eliminated the R word, and we're thinking differently. But an intellectual disability is a disability that is related to your cognition. And so, yes, you would have an IQ, and I don't like to get hung up on IQ scores and those kinds of things either. But that's that. And so sometimes it helps. I hate to even go there, but sometimes it helps for people to think about. We're talking about possibilities for a population for whom, 40 years ago, the only option was institutional. That was it. And now we're saying, okay, support careers, independent living, those kinds of things. But yes. And also, the last recommendation was to continue to pay attention on what those outcomes are and how it's impacting, how are the changes impacting our students with disabilities. So, of course, statute requires rules. That's one of the fun things that we get to do in the Department of Ed. When statutes are passed, and just as a reminder, we don't pass statutes. We're part of, so I like to do civics lessons because I'm a real believer in, how wonderful it is to live in this wonderful country where we get to participate in the process, the political process. So statutes are legislated by the legislators who you all elected. They're your locally elected officials who represent you. They come to Tallahassee, they pass legislation, then the governor either approves it or he doesn't approve it. If he doesn't, then it comes along. If he does, then it becomes statute, and then it gets passed to the different agencies to enforce. We're the executive branch. We work on behalf of the governor. But one of the things that we're charged to do, a lot of times the statute will say the Department of Ed or Department of Health or Department will make rules to implement the statute. So that is what we end up doing. So anytime you see, just a heads up, so if you see statute coming around that has to do with students with disabilities in school age, then most of the time there will be rulemaking. And when we do rulemaking, we We do a lot of public input. We have, it's noticed so people can call in and participate. But we have to create rules for these particular statutes. And so, part of our rule, there were reminders that students who began 9th grade in 2013 or 14 or earlier were able to continue to work on a special diploma if they chose to do so. But like I said, they also could move to the new pathways. Students who began in 14-15 may not work towards special diploma because a special diploma doesn't exist for them. So that was 14-15, they were in 9th grade. 15-16, they were in 10th grade. 16-17, they're going to be in 11th grade. 17-18 will be the first year that all graduates in Florida will be graduating with the standard diploma. All graduates of students in Florida. There will be no special diploma, but all graduate with the standard diploma. Pretty exciting. So of course, we're going to be paying attention to ensure that the data is continuing to go the way that we've seen it, in that positive trend. And also, of course, what are we doing on a day-to-day basis to support teachers, families, etc. So what does this mean? The standard diploma for access courses, and going back to your question, access courses, to put it in context, so federally, under the new ESSA, which is the Ever Student Succeeds Act, the law says that only 1% of the population should be working on modified standards, or alternate standards. All other students should be working on the same standards without them being modified, including students with disabilities. So in Florida, 99% of our students are participating in the traditional standards. If they have an IEP, they can be getting accommodations. They can get extra time. They may have, needing repeated directions, those kinds of things. So that's how the majority, so thinking about the children on the slide I showed, are kids who have learning disabilities, or kids who are speech impaired, language impaired. Most of those students you would expect them to be in the typical classes with accommodations. 1% of our population are participating in modified standards. In Florida, we call those our access points because they provide access to the traditional standards that all other kids participate in. Our access standards are aligned, and we have access courses. For every access course that we have, we've aligned it so that it mirrors the courses in general education that all kids participate in. So, but sometimes people freak out when they hear Algebra 1. Are you kidding? Well, if you look at our access standards, you really have to look at those access standards for Algebra 1 because they're really scaffolded down to the level of complexity based on the individual student's needs. Okay, so for students with significant cognitive disability, the IEP team has a lot of flexibility to identify goals that are very much at that student's level in terms of needs, and that's that 1%. So basically, when you get to the 1%, what we understand is the students are going to need something that's very, very different. But the 99%, there may be some variation, but for the most part, we know that students can be successful. So these are the courses. We also have the opportunity for any student with a disability to substitute a career and technical course for one access course or a traditional course including ELA, math, science, and social studies. They cannot, though, replace a course that's listed in statute as being required for graduation. Okay? Also, there needs to be at least 1/2 credit in something that would be an employment-based course, which would include paid employment at or above minimum wage, or competencies on a transition employment plan. Okay, and I basically talked about this. And also students both on our alternate assessment, so our students in our access standards are in access courses, and those courses then, they would take the Florida Standards alternate assessment. So there's that alignment. They also are eligible for a waiver as it relates to the standard assessment if it's needed for graduation and the team believes the student has demonstrated competency in another way. Yes?
When you say the standardized testing,
Yes.
are you talking about common core testings?
Well, I would be saying our Florida standards, either.
Equivalent to common core in other, is that?
Yes, yeah, our college and career ready standards, yes. Also, and of course, any test that's required to be taken in Florida. So in Florida, yes, that's our FSA, which replaced the FCAT, and our FSAA, which is our Florida Standards Alternate Assessment, and then end of course exams. We also have end of course exams for our alternate assessments.
They don't have to take, they can get a waiver to not take what used to be the MCAT.
No, they would take it. This is to waive the results. The test results. If the team believes that the results of the test are more an indication of their disability than their knowledge of the content, the team, including the parent, can request that the results be waived, and it's for the purpose of allowing for graduation requirements. So these are the tests that relate to being able to graduate. Yes, Tasha.
If the student has demonstrated whatever subject it is, that they know how to do it, why would the test show that that it's different?
Right, we have, there's, the group can answer.
The test is not modified do you know what I'm saying? It seems like it's surprising. If the student has mastered what he was taught or he or she was taught.
Because there's some, and I could do a whole nother session on this, but there's some accommodations that are not allowable on state standardized assessments that are allowed in your day-to-day teaching and learning. And so in order to protect students from it not being a result of their disability, how they perform on that,
One day and
that particular test, the waiver was put in. So it's a really good thing we have this as an option.
And that's only this year.
Okay. No, the waiver's been in, oh gosh, it's been a long time, 10 years, maybe more than that. Question?
I do. What if the person, and I maybe the SCD part would fit into this, but what if like they're at a place where they're functionally all right, but biology and geometry might just completely escape their abilities?
That's where access points, and again, it's an individual team decision. If a student has a significant cognitive disability, then they can participate in access points. And we do not use an IQ score to determine that. That's not needed. We just say, there's guidelines, and it talks about, the student has a significant cognitive disability. There's a variety of ways you can look at that. But it is limited to the 1%, and the federal government has now come out with that with the ESSA. So
even with those accommodations, if they were not able to do that, and they've gone to school all of this
for
time,
access
and
points,
there's no special diploma left, what option do they have if they can't get?
are you talking about for access points?
I'm talking about like for the end game. If they try to do the adjustments for the classes and everything, and at the end of all of that, they still cannot pass or identify that they have the knowledge of it, they don't get a diploma.
Well, we're
at
not.
all.
The good news is when I hear that, but mostly we're not seeing it on a kid. That's a fear. But what we find is by the time, because remember our kids have till they're 22, that if a student is determined to graduate, they're going to graduate, whether it's on the traditional classes or the access classes. So very rarely do we see a student not. Now, in a certificate of completion, here's another urban myth. In order to get a certificate of completion, you had to have already passed all those classes. The criteria means for a certificate of completion, I passed the classes, but I have less than, there's two reasons you would get a certificate of completion. This mainly happens to kids without an IEP. Now, whether that's fair or not, that's a conversation for another day. But here we're talking about our advocacy for kids with disabilities. But it's because my grade point average was less than 2.0, or I have not passed yet the state required assessment. So when I look at that, and I would say for a student with an IEP, first of all, what have we done to help that student retake classes that you failed? Because remember, in any kid in Florida, if you failed a class or got a D in a class, you have the opportunity to retake it. And then what have we done to help you be successful on the test? And then if we believe the test is actually indicating your disability rather than what you know, then let's sit and have a discussion about the waiver. And I will tell you also, for some kids who have never been identified, this is, as a senior in high school, I'm actually seeing where I just had a case recently where the student had a 504 plan, not an IEP, and was actually doing pretty well, but just couldn't pass. He was actually evaluated by an outside evaluator. The mom brought it in, and it turns out he met the criteria, and he got an IEP, so he was able to get the waiver. So sometimes this process actually brings kids to the forefront who maybe could have already had an IEP. You know what I'm saying? But they were doing okay, you know. And so a lot of our students with disabilities seem, you know, to struggle specifically with these particular assessments, these types of assessments. But as you can see, the majority are not. The majority are, well, what did I say, 48% graduated in the same way that all other students did. So it's not all, and that's good news. It's not like, you know, we're saying 100% of kids with disabilities shouldn't have to take any kinds of tests and prove it. You know, and I think we're going to see more and more of them passing. These are great questions. You guys are really good. These are some of the courses that can be substituted. And if you go here at this link, you'll see courses that individual districts, this would be a district decision in terms of what courses they offer, but these are courses that are allowable. So here are some of the options. As a reminder, in Florida we have a 24 credit option. We also have an 18 credit option that's available for students who take access points as well. And that's kind of surprising, but there's nothing that prohibits a student on access points from meeting that 18 credit. And basically the 18 credit, you don't have the same amount of electives that are needed. The challenge and concern I have from an educational perspective would be to ensure that if the student were to take advantage of the 18 credit, how are we planning for post-secondary? Because to me, particularly if I have a significant cognitive disability, without those extra courses, those activities, those job training things, how am I going to prepare? So what I've seen is some students who use the 18 credit, they defer then graduation, but they continue working with the school district on those other things. But they've met their graduation requirements. So that's kind of it's like a check. You can check that off the box. Yes, now I can focus on my post-secondary preparation. We do continue to have a GED exit option. We don't promote that. That for some students who are, you know, if I'm 20 years old, I don't have a significant cognitive disability, I'm 20 years old, and I've got 1 credit, this may be an option. Now, we don't have very many students. Sadly, we have more students who are in those situations that have been through in and out of juvenile justice education and those kinds of things. They've just not been in school a lot. We also have our International Baccalaureate program, and then the Advanced International Certificate of Education. Special diploma, like I said, will no longer be available after next year's graduating class.
Is that last one, I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Is that last one still considered acceptable for employers? Because I know the GED would be, of course, IB would be.
These are, yes.
Is that last one?
Yes, it's really, that's a good question. This is really like,
is that like an accelerated?
yes, it's like an additional thing to your diploma. Right. Yes, good question. And the GED is acceptable by most employers. But the GED, and for those of you whose children maybe are more mildly disabled, the challenge with the GED, because I hear kids say, oh, maybe I want to drop out and just take the GED, is hard to pass. And you guys already know that. And the longer you've been out of school, so sometimes I'll have older students who maybe just, you know, I don't want to go to school, I want to drop out, I want to work. And maybe they're 17, and now they're like, okay, I know I need a diploma because I can't advance at my job. I'm stuck now in my entry-level job, and I'm ready to advance. I've got good work skills. So it's hard to take the GED because now I've had students say, I really need to take all those courses again. And then they say, I didn't even pay attention the first time. So it's like, I'm not going to pass the GED. So we really are trying to, you know, I've seen gifted kids go in and take the GED and pass, you know, but they've retained all that information. You know, it's there. But most of our children, if they, I'm getting the time. Okay, all right, anyhow. So our goal is to not promote a GED, but certainly it's an option. And we do have programs to help students for that, if that may be a good option for them. We've gone over these. We talked about the courses that are needed. These are the same that all students need. 4 English language arts courses. This goes back to your question, ma'am, about these are high school courses. 4 in high school. These are the same that we all took. English 1, English 2, English 3. 4 math, including Algebra 1 and Geometry. Science, including biology, and at least 2 equally rigorous courses that have a lab. We do allow career technical substitutions, and that's good. In other words, if it's a science-related technical course, those can be substituted. And then social studies, including world history, U.S. history, government, and economics. Also needing a fine and performing arts, PE, physical education, 8 electives. Unless you go with the 18-hour, you don't need all those electives. And our students need to take an online course. We do have a provision in our statute that if an online course is not appropriate for a student with a disability, that it can be waived. Now, I'm going to put my educator and mama hat back on. I think our kids really need to be learning these online courses because that's where most of our learning as adults is happening now. You know, so we have to think of how do we support our kids. We still have the option, though, it can be waived. And more of our students are participating successfully in online courses. But I think when they made that provision, they were afraid that they're really careful, and we should be glad, is that when they make a statute, they really try whenever they can to build in a protection. So in case the student with a disability, this isn't right for them, the IEP team can make another decision. So I think that's a good thing that we have some protections. Yes?
You're talking about online courses. I'm finding that with my son in 6th grade, he's pretty much in almost all online courses through Odyssey, and I'm not in favor of it. And actually, I'll tell you, because ESE-wide, what they told me was specifically the teacher and the principal were said to me, well, you know, with all the ESE, imagine a whole bunch of ESE kids in a classroom, all they're going to be doing is throwing spitballs and acting up and doing all this.
Okay.
But when you put them in front of the computer, then they're focused on that. And like, really? Like, so that's kind of, so you really, what you're addressing is
So we'll
classroom
chat.
management.
Yeah, we'll chat. We'll
Okay.
definitely chat. Now, what our students, yeah, you can give her one of the cards. That would be great. What's interesting, what the students, because we go around and I do focus groups with students all across the state. Students, most students actually, although some do prefer online, some of you may participate in online. Most students that I talk to say, I actually prefer face-to-face. I actually want to have interaction with the teacher. So online seems to be harder for a lot of the kids, but it's a choice. So I think that's the thing we need to make sure, well, it should be a choice. It should be a choice. Yes.
Before we leave, I was just curious, is there any way you can touch on at all what was mentioned last night about the new legislation coming into play about signing the IEP?
Oh,
Can
okay.
you skim what that looks
Yeah,
like?
yeah, that's a good point. So what Senator Gardner was talking about in the legislation that was passed and signed by the governor, it specifically relates to 3 things that parents have to give consent for the IEP. Not everything, 3. Moving a student to access points and access courses.
Right.
Moving a student to special diploma, because at the time it was still on the books, and in essence it's still on the books. And the 3rd is moving a student to a separate school.
Okay, so.
Those 3 things.
Can you define that?
A separate school would be a school that only serves students with disabilities.
So only center schools.
Center schools. Right, so you would have to give consent as a parent for your student to be on access points and access courses
No, we don't have those ones.
and participating in a separate center school. So those are the 3 things.
Why do those still even exist?
They're access courses?
Center schools.
Well, that's an interesting discussion, and I will say that every year I have parents who love them and parents who ask that same question. And there's probably both here in this room. So it's so right now they're a choice though. They're meant to be a choice, and that's again why families have to give consent, is to make sure that it's an informed choice.
So there's not very many center schools even in the state line, right?
No, there are not. No. But the few that there are, I can tell you, I hear from parents who love them and actually are afraid that we have this plan to shut them down, which by the way, we don't. We don't. But we do want to make sure that it's a choice. That families aren't feeling like I've got a child with significant medical complexity and the district saying the only place we're going to serve your child is at a separate school. Now what districts can do is have what we would call cluster programs programs, which would be meaning, kind of to the mama's point last night about nursing services for her child who has complex needs. A district can put on a traditional campus classes and services for students who have, maybe more complex needs and add more supports to that school, make sure you have nursing staff, but it still would be a traditional campus. So students should be in gen ed, they can have access to gen ed, those kinds of things. But we do have center schools still, and there was my slide about significant cognitive disability. There you go. IQ score alone is not sufficient. The other thing is, I know I'm out of time, but last couple points. If you are a student on access points, we have made it clear that you can take classes that are higher than access. Okay? There's nothing to prohibit you from taking higher courses. And we've seen that happen. What's so cool, again, that's why I started by saying, I think we need to throw out everything in our mind that we think we know about kids with complex disabilities and just say, maybe we don't even know what the possibilities are. Did I get an amen? Is that what it was?
I have a colleague who has a friend, her daughter has a disability, and she graduated Algebra 1, passed EOC.
Yeah, I know, I get goosebumps. So we're pushing that, so we don't want that to be a barrier. We wanted to make sure everybody knew, just because you're on access courses, if you've got a strength in an area, because it used to be, well, if you're strong in an area, then maybe you don't have a significant cognitive disability. Well, there's not a lot of research to support that, because what we know is that some kids have an uneven profile of strengths and weaknesses. And so rather than just say, well, then you can't take any access, well, then let them take the access and then try those harder classes. They still have access as an option if they need the modified standards. The reverse is not true. If I'm a student with a mild disability, and let's say I'm failing Algebra 1 just because I'm failing Algebra 1, and I needed maybe more accommodations, more studying, but I do have the ability to take that, I can't go to an access Algebra 1 class. Do you see how we're protecting?
Right.
We're protecting so that we're making sure that we're giving kids the rigor that they need. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned about that you're getting the education for all the teachers, the 20 hours
Yes.
in ESC, which I think is phenomenal.
Good.
But what are we doing about educating our schools and our educators about the other end of the spectrum, like most exceptional students?
Right.
Because I have one on both ends of the spectrum, and that's been a huge issue because I have been going